What I'm going to do is install this radio, which I purchased on the internet, and I'm going to install it here in the dashboard. This is happens to be a 70 Chevelle, but what happens is that it just had an AM radio in here, and I am going to put this one in here. So what that means, well, here's the faceplate that goes on, just a little bracket. So this is basically the hole that I have to cut. So I have to make a cut here, around here, stick it in here, totally wire the whole thing up, and get it to play. I also bought new speakers for the front. That goes right in here. And I also bought speakers for the back. What I had before was a different type of speaker. One that had the grates up on the top, and I wanted to change the look. So since I bought myself a new deck, I just drilled 4 holes, and I have 4 screws from the top, which I painted green so they would sort of disguise it. And alright, to install the speakers, I have to take the dash off. I already did it, but I just want to show you how it's done. So there is screws right here, all the way along, and plus inside the glove compartment, a couple screws right here. Once you take all those screws out, and they're just small little Phillips, then you just lift this up and pull this out, and the whole thing comes out. Because it has these clips. These clips right here. And they basically, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of them. Alright? So what happens is when you slip the dash in, it will go underneath this metal piece, underneath this metal bracket. There's 6 of these brackets where it just slides in and bolts down. And all these type generation cars are exactly the same. Well, they all go in the same way. Alright, I already installed the front speakers. So how they went in is the speaker comes and there's a bracket. So there's 2 screws on either side, and then 2 screws right here that go onto the frame. And here's the passenger side front speaker. Again, here's the 2 wires. Here's the bracket. So you bolt the speaker to the bracket and the bracket to the frame. Now for the rear speakers, I already have them in. I didn't think about making this movie till it was too late. So what I did is I had one of these style grates up on the top on the deck, and I didn't like it. And of course it had the speaker. So basically this grate went over the top. Grate was on the top and the speaker was right here. So what I did is I took this grate here. I'm just going to stick it up here because it'll stick because it's got magnetism. I lined this up to the bottom of the deck here, and I marked it, and then I drilled 4 holes so they come up to the top, and then I put the speaker, I put the screws through the holes, put the speakers up, and then just twisted these. Well, they're like nuts, but they're really not. They're just a piece of metal with a flap on it so the screw goes through. And that's enough to hold it up. Then I hooked up the 2 wires, and of course ran all the wires all the way back through the bottom of the trunk right there. So I did the same thing for this side. Here's the 2 wires, and there it is. It runs alongside. Once again, here is the top side, and here's what the grate used to look like, and it just went down through these 4 holes. But I didn't want this anymore. I just wanted a clean look. So, once again, on the underside, I just put it up and marked where these 4 holes would be, and just drilled from the bottom up 4 screws. The wires for the back speakers, I had the back seat out, so they come through the wall over there, and it goes underneath the rug. And to get them to the front of the dash, I take off this panel. It's got 4 screws, and then I run it right along in here, okay, and along there. And I also took this side panel off and fished the wires through. And here it is. Here's one of them, and here's the other one. So there's your speakers from the wires from the back, and this one and this one here, and this one are the 2 front speakers. So what I want to do now is hook it up. The next step, since I purchased this radio off the internet, I really didn't know if it worked. So before I go and cut the dash, or once I cut it I can't recover, what I decided to do was plug the radio in. Here's the wire harness. Okay, so I plugged in the wire harness, and then I hooked up all the speakers. Here's the right rear speaker. Here's this one is the rear left speaker, and then I know that these here are the front ones. I hooked up all my power. This is constant 12 volt power. This one is switched. This one goes off the switch, so I'm hooking this to the old power from the radio. Here's the ground, and that way, after I plugged it all in, I turned the car on and I played the radio. This one has a cassette and a CD. Now that I'm 100% sure that the radio works, I'm going to start hooking up all the wires. And we're going to solder them, and I'll unsolder this and put it back, and put the shrink wrap tubing around it so it doesn't make contact with any other wires. And the basic setup is not very hard. On the back of the radio, it will tell you what all the wires do. Like right here, for instance, the yellow one is a 12 volt constant. The red one is a 12 volt accessory. The black one is ground. And then for the 4 speakers, we have white and black, that's the front. The left speaker, gray and gray black, that's the front right speaker. And the rear ones are green and violet. So, and that's where they all over here. We ran all the wires, as you can see. So now what we're going to do is just solder them all up, put the shrink wrap on those, and we'll be all set with electrical, and then we'll do the physical installation of the radio itself. So let's start with hooking the power up. This is power constant, and the red one is accessories, and the black one is ground. So we use just a standard wire cutters and just cut a little bit of the insulation off. Give that a little twist. So this is black, this is ground. So what we're doing here is taking this plug that came from the old radio, and we know that, looking up on a diagram, that this yellow one is power, and that's the power that it comes on when you turn the switch on. Okay, so we'll clean that wire off too. Give that a little twist. This is the black, so that's ground. And then the other thing you want to do is put some shrink wrap on here. So we'll just cut some off here. Just these. Okay, so we'll put it on the wire. Here's the black one to the ground. So we'll twist up these two. We'll do the same. This one is constant. Okay, constant goes to this other red wire that we connected directly to the fuse box itself. So this wire ran underneath all the way up, and it hooks right to the battery terminal over here on the fuse box itself. So that will be our constant power. Alright, so there's our constant power, negative, and here's switched. Means that when you turn the ignition on, so when you turn the ignition on, key, this will power up and power down. Alright, so we have the wires on here. So now let's get a soldering gun. I just used this old soldering gun. You can use any kind you want. I also use this solder that has a little flux in it. So I just put the soldering, the tip right there on the wire. Wait for it to get warm. And just melt the solder right in. Once the wires get really hot, you'll see. Whoa, you'll see that the solder just goes in between the wire. I put this this white rag here, so when I get solder drippings, they don't melt my rug. So now we'll just do the ground one. Same concept. Just get it really warm. And when the wires get really warm, then the solder will just flow right in between the wires. And then we know we have a good solid connection. Cool down just a little bit. We'll put the shrink wrap over the top. And just put a little heat to it. And there it goes. Don't put too much so it doesn't melt it. Okay, that's one. And now we'll do the last one. This is constant. Okay, so we just let the solder gun heat up. Solder that already has flux in it, the solder will just melt right into the wire. And there it goes. Now as it cooled down, just sort of bend it over a little bit. Put the heat shrink tubing on there. And there it is. So it's all soldered and all sealed, so it won't make contact with anything else. So let's do the speaker wires. Now we're going to finish up the rest of this. Hook all these together, solder them up, and I guess we'll start right with here. This is the front right speaker. Here it is right here. Oh no, that's gray. Front right. So if you look at the speaker itself, you'll see this little plus sign here. They're all marked, every one of them, and this happens just to be the solid silver line versus the copper. So the copper is the negative one. So let's just splice all these wires, or take the insulation off, put the heat shrink tubing on, solder it up. And here's the last two that need to be soldered. Just get the wire hot, apply a little solder. There it goes. Pull over the shrink wrap. And there it goes. So now we have all the wirings done. So here's the radio. We just pull off the faceplate here. This part of it through here to see if that's the correct spacing, and that happens to be. And this is the rim around it. So now we know what the outside diameters. The outside dimensions. I'm just going to put this here. I'm going to take a pencil, sort of space it, line it all up. And now that I think that it's even across here, I will just mark it. Okay, so now I know that this has to come out to this point, this over here, in order that we can get the radio in. Okay, I was going to try a jigsaw, but I'm afraid that it's going to go through this plastic so fast, so I have the blade from a hacksaw. And it seems to be doing the job. Okay, that's one side. So let's try the other side. There we go. Okay, I start cutting the hole for the radio, and it's still not enough, but since I bought this off the internet, it didn't come all with all the parts. I forgot that there is a sleeve that goes on over the radio. Like this. But they didn't send it to me, so I had to buy it separate. So make sure when you buy these radios off the internet, you get everything. So basically what happens is this sleeve goes over here, this goes in here, and these edges here lock all the way around to hold it there. And then after this is done, you press these tabs over and it locks it on the sides, top and bottom, whatever you can get access to. Then you put your radio in, and that will hold most of it. And then what happens on the back, there is a bracket that bolts to the back of the radio, and then you can bolt this other part of the bracket to some other part. Way in the back here, there's a little steel bar that goes all the way across the whole back of the dash. So we will be bolting it to that. So what we have to do now is basically put this in here and just keep on trimming that plastic until we can put this in, slide this in and catch the ridges. So what I'm going to do is just take a file, since it's pretty easy filing, and file this plastic. Just a little bit at a time. There, so that fits that way. Now we just have to chisel off a little bit on the top here and a little bit here on the bottom equally, so that this thing will just slide in. Remember, because it's got to catch on these edge pieces here, so we got to be careful. Take your time. So as you file away here, make sure you don't go too far. Just keep on checking the box as it goes along, that it just barely fits, because that's what you want, a nice tight fit like that. So we'll just continue to do the rest. Take a little bit off this side, a little bit over here, and then we'll have it. Remember, you can't go back, so you got to take your time. Alright, this is the last stage. Now that we got this all trimmed out perfect, here's our cage. It fits right in there. Okay, so what we have to do to make this cage fit even better is, on the sides, right over here, you'll see these little tabs. So we'll just, when we put it in there, we're going to bend them over. There's one there, there's a couple here up on the top, on the bottom, and on the side. So see, it fits just perfect. I can't believe how nice that came out. Alright, so we're going to bend this over, and then these up here, and then one on this side. The next thing we're going to do is, after this is done, we're going to install the radio, hook up the antenna wire, and plug in the electrical. Now we have all the electrical all wired in, ready to go, and then if this yellow cable here is the antenna. So the next thing we're going to do is bend these over, put the radio in, put the bracket in, plug it in, and we're ready to go. Okay, so with the radio in, we have, if you look at this, there's a nut right there at the end of the bracket coming off the radio, and that bracket goes down to the, over here, the bracket is bolted to the radio here. Here's the bracket that bolts to the bottom of the dashboard, and of course it just hangs out here. And then here is the connection to the antenna. You plug that in, and then all the wires plug into the back of the radio. If you can see it here, right here. So now you got the wires, antenna, the bracket. Now this bracket, I'll just leave this here because I can tie wrap all these wires to it and keep it out of the way. So that's the basic installation. Now that everything's all hooked up, the nicest thing is when you plug it in and it works. Now, the reason why I selected this radio here, and I bought it on the internet, is because it has a CD player, and of course I have CDs. Also has a tape player, which a lot of them don't have. Of course, a lot of people don't have tapes anymore, but I just happen to have a whole bunch of them. So it comes with a tape player, CD, and a regular radio, and it all works. So it's worth all the hard work.